You guys know what two words are horrifying to the Sonic series? The canon. Alright, you've heard this likely 1,000 times by now. That being, the Sonic canon is freaking nuts. Sure, the series operates on episodic storytelling for the most part, but the canon of this series is complex to say the least, especially since the fact that everything is supposedly canon in the Sonic franchise with its games. But you've heard this before. That's not what we're here to talk about today. Instead, I want to share something that might be a little interesting and might be worthy of a like and subscribe of the sorts, perhaps. I'm never doing that again. With how crazy the Sonic canon can be, and how we just said the series operates on episodic storytelling for the most part, that begs the question, what happens when a new fan jumps in for the very first time with no previous knowledge of the series at all, and has to roll with it? No pun intended. Wait, who's this yellow guy? And that's not even a joke. I actually thought Sonic and Super Sonic were two different characters when I first saw this when I was a little kid. Then I watched it again and paid better attention. Alright, so I'm not sure if I'm alone on this or not, but flashback to when I was a kid, episodic storytelling was a lot of my childhood with other characters and franchises I loved growing up. I had a big, wild imagination, at least in terms for making stories for characters within a franchise. Some of my favorite franchises before Sonic in my life was Thomas the Tank Engine and other classics at the time, but Thomas stood out to me because of not only how appealing it was to me, but the stories they told with the real-life models for filming would intrigue me when I was very little a lot. Throughout my childhood, I'd either recreate episodes with my toys, or I would even make up my own stories trying to tie everything together because of its episodic storytelling through its series. You see, the whole thing with episodic storytelling is you can jump in anytime and be good to go. No need for any catch-ups, recaps, nothing. It's all explained right at the get-go, who these characters are and what they do. This kind of storytelling is in a lot of media and was very present in a lot of shows and franchises I loved growing up. It was scattered so much for me everywhere when I was a kid that eventually it became the norm by the time I was about 4 years old. So, when I was introduced to Sonic with its own episodic storytelling throughout its series, you can imagine once I'd see more of the world and characters, my tiny little imagination would start to run wild. So, what did I do? I made up my own canon, and let me tell you, it was pretty freaking nuts! So yes, that's the subject of today's video, ladies and gentlemen. Strap yourself in for this one, everybody, because today, I'm going to tell you the story of my weird childhood Sonic timeline that I thought was the canon of the Sonic series back when I was a little kid. Bear a warning real quick, this is going to get weird very fast, and how I came to these conclusions, I'm going to warn you, I was like 4, 5, and 6 years old when I thought of this, so please don't judge a little kid me, alright? So, let's start our story. So where does our story start? Sonic 1? Sonic 2? Sonic 3? Oh, you wish. Sonic Adventure or Adventure 2? Oh, that's funny. No, where we start is here. Yeah, we're starting here with this story. Okay, so if you know me, you know my introduction to this series was Sonic Unleashed for the Nintendo Wii when my dad bought one. And if you want my personal opinion, this was probably the best introduction I could have gotten to this series entirely with Sonic Unleashed because this opening is awesome. So with that aside, here's where I thought everything started with Sonic. Now, I never really took the time to think if Sonic was already a thing by this point. This was just how I first saw Sonic, and this opening truly does everything justice. It's been talked about a number of times on this platform before, but this opening really does a good job at setting the groundwork for letting you know who these two characters are, their history, and just in general, their personalities as a whole, and also letting you know the plot of what's going on within this story. And everything that goes on within this opening was engaging to me enough as a kid for me to at least get sold on this series, so much so that my father actually saw this and would end up buying me the Classic Collection for the PS2 Mega Collection Plus. And this will actually be how I first played the classics. Now, I gotta be honest, I have no clue when I would think this would take place within the Sonic series. If I could try to sum this up the best I can, I think my brain just said, okay, these take place before Sonic Unleashed, I guess, because Sonic 1, 2, and 3. I knew how to count, so I think I just assumed that these came before Sonic Unleashed, so this is before Sonic would be the werehog and whatnot in this game. So as we already just went over, my Sonic canon consists of Sonic 1, 2, 3, and Sonic Unleashed. Fast forward to Easter of 2010, I would not only become more of a Sonic fan when I'd get my first few Sonic plushies I ever had, but also I would then get a copy of Sonic and the Secret Rings as well. Here is where I'd start to see more of Sonic, and I would become more of a big fan. And by this point, I was already a big fan of Sonic X, so I also managed to find new characters too, like Cream and Cheese, Rouge, Shadow, and so on. But I need to mention something real fast. I never finished Sonic Unleashed. Unleashed. So, by the time I got to Secret Rings, I thought this was going to be more of an episodic storytelling where Sonic eventually finished his journey in Sonic Unleashed, and that was that. But here's the first question I asked whenever there was a nighttime ambience in Sonic and the Secret Rings. Why is he not the werehog? That's right. When I first played Sonic and the Secret Rings, I was immediately thinking to myself, and also whenever I first watched Sonic X whenever it was nighttime, I was thinking to myself and asking my dad, why is he not the werehog, Dad? That's right. Now, I feel like I need to mention this. Whenever I was a kid, I didn't beat many video games. In fact, the first time I ever beat a game was in 2015 with Sonic Generations. This was the first game I ever beat, and I'd never beaten any game up to that point. So by the time I got to Sonic and the Secret Rings, I thought Sonic was just stuck with the werehog forever. So yeah, that's right. Sonic 1, 2, 3, and the beginning of Sonic Unleashed, Sonic is normal. But after this opening, nope, he is stuck with this werehog forever. This is forever a part of him. I don't know why I thought this. That's just how my brain thought it went together as a kid. So that was probably an interesting misconception when it came to Sonic and the Secret Rings, but slowly I would start to figure something out whenever I'd see Sonic in more nighttime settings within stuff like Sonic X. I just assumed that in some way, shape, or form, at some time in Sonic Unleashed, that Sonic would somehow lose the werehog, or the electricity that shocked Sonic would get taken out of him, and that would take away his werehog form. I actually remember telling my dad this, that I thought that's how it worked. I'm not kidding. I actually remember this. Now let's fast forward throughout 2010, where we need to get another game involved and whatnot. Now you're probably wondering what this is. Is it the adventure games? Or is it maybe Sonic CD? Or is it maybe Sonic Heroes or something? You wish! I would play the adventure games till like 6 years later. So the amount of Sonic media I've consumed by this point consists of the classics, Unleashed, X, and Secret Rings. This is where we are now, and this is the Sonic canon that I have in my head. I'll be honest, looking back, I probably should have assumed that there was more Sonic adventures out there, but I thought that this was the timeline. These were all the Sonic games that were out there, and they were in this specific order. If you're gonna notice something, and I'm pretty sure you might be picking up on this, is that every piece of media that I got when I was a kid is that the order I got it, I thought that was the order it came out. So it consists of Mega Collection Plus with the classics, Sonic Unleashed, Secret Rings, and then the next few games that would come after that. The third title that I would end up playing that would be the third Sonic game in my Sonic canon would be not Sonic and the Black Knight, not Sonic Adventure 1 or 2, it would end up being Sonic Colors. By the time this game came out, I've already been a huge Sonic fan, and this was the new Sonic game at the time. Now, strap yourself in for this one, because this is probably going to be the most interesting by far, because unlike Sonic and the Secret Rings, this isn't just going to be Sonic going on yet another adventure. So one of the things that kind of made me a little bit on Sonic and the Secret Rings growing up was because it was nothing like Sonic Unleashed day stages. That's one of the things I loved so much about Unleashed upon first playing it, was how fast Sonic could go, and of course the boost and whatnot with Unleashed. Even though you could say the 360 version is arguably better, this was still a great first impression for me when I was a kid. So you can imagine how much I loved Sonic Unleashed boosting gameplay. Going to Secret Rings was a little jarring to say the least. So whenever I did get my hands on Sonic Colors for the Wii, immediately upon booting up the game, into that first act of Tropical Resort, that was the coolest thing I've probably seen at this point with Sonic. Immediately, it looks like Sonic Unleashed, and we're playing similar to Sonic Unleashed. Wait, why are his hands not in fists like before? That is a question I actually thought. So with Sonic Colors, I had the great gameplay from Unleashed, from now brought to Colors, and I'm having a fun time with it. And then, we see the first cutscene.
Incredible Interstellar Amusement Park, where you can enjoy 5 planets for the price of 1.
He loves to hear his own lips flap, but I gotta hand it to the Eggster. This place is epic. Everyone and their brother is gonna want to come here.
No.
Now here is where things get interesting, because most people reacted and said,
"Why the heck do you sound so weird, Dad? What? That's not good voice direction."
but little 5-year-old me was saying, wait, why is his voice that way? But then I thought to myself, oh, it's obvious. It's Sonic's space voice, of course, because he's in space, and therefore, the atmosphere of space makes his voice sound way deeper than how he does back on Earth. So therefore, this is Sonic's space voice. And Tails has a space voice too, kinda. And Eggman, nothing changes with him because he sounds perfectly normal in the Unleashed opening, so here where Sonic's actually in space more than the Unleashed opening, then he
Showing remorse.
he has his space voice because space voice, I guess. So yeah, that was the reasoning when I was 5 years old. Not because there was a voice actor replacement, no, it's just because Sonic has his space voice. And yeah, I didn't really think too much of it. I just said, okay, Sonic space voice, whatever. And I just said to myself, I'll just wait till the next Sonic game comes out where he's back on Earth and his voice will be back to normal. That's what I thought. I just thought because he was in space, Sonic sounded this way. I don't know why I thought this way. And I think what made this theory go on longer was because I think around this time I'd also maybe end up playing other spin-off games from the DS or Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games, and Sonic would sound perfectly normal there too. So, upon seeing those, I just thought, yeah, that's Sonic's space voice in colors, that's why he sounds deeper. That's the only real reason I can think why I thought this still. Don't get it twisted though. I had a fun time with colors, and the story, while yes, in retrospect, is very simple and very interesting to think about when especially comparing it to the last game that came out at the time. I will say that thinking back to whenever I first watched that cutscene of Sonic and Eggman meeting for the Tropical Resort boss, I will admit, Sonic did feel a little bit weird and somewhat kinda out of character for me whenever I did see this, cause you gotta remember, the material I had to work with at the time already established who I knew and thought Sonic was, because it did a good job at telling us Sonic's character within this piece of media of the 2000s. So you can imagine when Sonic Colors comes along, when they're trying to change everything and run away from what they was, even as a 5-year-old, I still managed to notice that Sonic was changing a little bit through this game with the writing and whatnot. But Sonic still felt a little bit the same to me, mainly because of his posing and his attitude. I still felt that kinda unleashed presence, especially right here as a kid, but I don't know, it felt kind of weaker in comparison. So Sonic Colors, yes, this would be the next game in my Sonic canon timeline. There's not too much more to say because the farthest I got at the time whenever I first played this game, whenever I got my next game, I got to about Sweet Mountain. And by the time I played this next game, I actually have a pretty interesting segue that my childhood brain actually came up with. And the next game that I would end up playing after Sonic Colors would end up being simply Yeah, I know, kind of funny, right? We're still going backwards. So by this point, we are now likely in the year 2011, where the Sonic series was forever going in the meta-era route, where we get to have games like Sonic Generations, and even Mario and Sonic at the London 2012 Olympic Games. The only game we have of the Sonic meta-era so far was Sonic Freeriders and Sonic Colors. For me as a kid, I was still going back and playing previous Sonic games by this point. I played a number of games on my DS, but I didn't know where I could really put these games on the timeline. If anything, I put them in between games like Sonic Colors and Sonic Unleashed at some point. I would just put them in between and just kind of pick and choose where it went and whatnot. But what I thought was the next game for Sonic games at the time would end up being Sonic and the Black Knight. Now, I want to touch on what I said earlier about this being a segue from Sonic Colors. You see this shot here where Sonic comes from falling out of the sky? Not only did this create a thing that I thought was common in Sonic games and Sonic media, where Sonic falls out of the sky into his next adventure, because, Unleashed did it, and now this does it. Yes, this was a thing, by the way. I used to think that Sonic falling out of the sky was just run the course by this point, but my brain didn't think, oh, Sonic got pulled from his world. No, instead, Sonic got pulled from Eggman's Interstellar Amusement Park up in space. And I actually even thought this out. Let me go ahead and explain to you what went on in my childhood brain. Like I said, Sonic Colors, I didn't get too far in that game until whenever I played Sonic and the Black Knight. And whenever I did play Sonic and the Black Knight, whenever I first watched the opening cutscene, and watching it over and over again, my brain kind of came up with the theory being that instead of Sonic getting sucked through a portal into this world, Sonic is getting pulled back down to Earth from the Interstellar Amusement Park. Sonic is in Eggman's Interstellar Amusement Park, just walking around holding some chili dogs or something. Out of nowhere, a blue portal opens up and sucks him back down to Earth into King Arthur's realm. And thus, that's why Sonic is falling out of the sky, because he got pulled out of Eggman's Interstellar Amusement Park, bought some chili dogs up there, and fell out of the sky into King Arthur's realm. And because he was technically back on Earth, Sonic has his regular voice back and no longer has his space voice. And that's what I thought this was, and here we are. Continue on with this adventure now, and we'll go deal with the Eggman Interstellar Amusement Park later. Oh my gosh. Ow! And this would be the fourth and final game where I had my own wacky Sonic childhood canon, because by the time I got to Sonic and the Black Knight, I was then starting to keep up with new games that were coming out, like Mario and Sonic at the London 2012, and even Sonic Generations, so I'd start to kind of keep up with new games that were coming out, and I thought I was all caught up by this point. Little did I know. But the childhood canon that I had would actually end up fading away because, one, I would actually end up discovering that there was proper endings to these games, and that they just didn't end abruptly, where Sonic now has to deal with the Werehog forever, or that Sonic just has a space voice. Now, I'd find that out the hard way through Mario and Sonic at the London 2012 Olympic Games, where I thought I was going to hear this.
Here we go!
When in reality, I heard this.
Here we go!
And also, it was just frankly me just getting older and realizing that, hey, that's not how this works. But looking back on all this, it was actually kind of fun to think about how I thought the Sonic series worked when I was about 4, 5, and 6 years old. And it's that kind of imagination factor that I kind of admired that I had when I was a kid. And it's really interesting to think about, honestly, especially considering how the canon works and how it eventually figure out how things work with where the series is very convoluted and crazy. But also me just trying to simply put the puzzle pieces of this franchise together is kind of interesting to think about, honestly. And this is something that I really wanted to try to document as much as I can with this video. Everything that I had to think about with this was pretty much how this whole thing worked. The story of my childhood Sonic canon is very fascinating to say the least, and I don't know if there's anyone out there that has this as well, but let me know in the comments. Do you guys have a weird childhood Sonic canon, or am I the only one that does this? Genuinely let me know. But anyways, that's it for this video. Let me know what your own childhood Sonic canon timeline was when you were a kid, if you had one. But anyways, I'll see you guys in the next one. Until then, everyone, take care.